Diving in and recapping the NFL Wildcard Weekend. That's what we're doing today on RotoViz Overtime. We're going to look through some of the results, the outcomes, and kind of look at it as well from some of the young players who, unfortunately for them, a couple of them here on losing battles, but having very impressive performances in the playoffs, and kind of talking about what that might mean as we move ahead to 2026. Disappointing, Shawn. At this point, we have none of our teams remaining in the playoffs. Shawn's Chiefs are gone, the Lions are gone, the Packers are gone. Shawn, the team of RotoViz Overtime never even made it there, that being the Indianapolis Colts at one point. But this week, the Packers had a chance to try and stay in it, but they did not do that. We talked last week. We did have a little bit of a difference of opinion on how this game might go. I was sitting, Shawn, at halftime feeling like, I think I might have been right on this one. But
you're like, I can't wait for the show to really get some shots in here.
Yeah. So, and it obviously fell apart. The Packers really completely nullified the Bears in this one in the first half, and not necessarily nullified them, but the Bears being aggressive as we would expect on fourth down, trying to convert in those situations. It means that outside of the field goal on their opening drive, they come away with only the 3 points in the first half. And the Packers actually, I don't think it actually did do anything detrimentally to how the game played out, but they do miss a long field goal at the end of the first half. And I kind of felt the Packers had shut them down to such a point. You know, sometimes we see teams maybe take a knee at that particular intersection of the game and be like, well, we'll just take it into halftime. The Packers were getting the ball back to start the second half, but the Packers go 3 and out to get things going. And it really kind of went downhill from there overall. They found it very hard to get going on offense again. They do get a touchdown to Matthew Golden, which I thought was a spectacular play. He's one of the players that I'm going to try and get some of Shawn's thoughts on in a moment. But when he makes that play, I read in my notes, what a play. Does he save the day? Because it felt like, you know, sand kind of sliding through your fingers in this situation where the Bears are trying to mount their comeback, but you're doing enough to hold them to field goals. You're not letting them get in the end zone. And it looked like they may see it out when they get that touchdown at that particular point. But it wasn't to be. And the note, Shawn, I took on this is the Packers have played the Bears 3 times over, say, the last 6 weeks or so. The Bears have 6 first half points. So they've been kind of nullified. And this was something that I talked to you about, you know, keeping Caleb Williams in structure, not letting him out in the outside, trying to keep the game ahead of themselves. And the Packers have done that exceptionally well in the first half. The problem is they've given up approximately 60 points in the second half of these 3 games against the Bears in OT and in regulation. And they had a game just a couple of weeks back where I believe they were 14 points up. It got forced to the overtime. The Bears win in overtime. So the Packers have struggled in that department, and it kind of helps to continue the feeling around Caleb Williams late in these games. The commentary team kept talking about, you know, the late game and them thinking that they can win in these situations. He does have an incredible play on fourth down where if he doesn't get the first down pass to Rome Odunze, the game is over. They complete that, and then they go on to win from that point. But the Packers had a missed extra point, which meant that they had to go for the touchdown at the end with the 4-point gap. They couldn't just settle for the field goal there. They miss a field goal then before the Bears get that touchdown, which, you know, wouldn't really have mattered. I was in that point of the game where, we talk, Shawn, sometimes about you give a team, you know, a 6-point deficit, then they know they have to get the touchdown, versus kind of when the Packers missed that field goal, I'm like, maybe the Bears just think, let's try and get a field goal and go to overtime. But that wasn't the case. They just went for the jugular and got the win. But the Packers kind of tailed off really bad, including then giving up 25 points, Shawn, in the fourth quarter. Even when we get to, you know, the fourth quarter kicking off at that particular point, the Packers have a 21-6 lead, so pretty comfortable. And, you know, you look at all the metrics around, you know, win probability and how things should play out. This just a bad luck all around. And I know we've talked a lot about Matt LaFleur. There's the talk in the media over the last kind of 24 hours about what will the Packers do, what will happen all around there. He has a year left in his deal. It sounds like they're going to renegotiate and try and extend that. And as a Packers fan on this, I'm kind of in the middle. I think that you're kind of in that place where you're pretty much guaranteed the playoffs nearly every single year. But, you know, when you get into the playoffs, then you have a chance to win. But it kind of feels like you're in that place of, if you get in and get fortunate, you might go on a run rather than like you're going to completely outcoach some of these other teams. That just doesn't seem to be the element. But at halftime, you're looking like Matt LaFleur is, you know, crushing Ben Johnson here. You get to the end and it's like, this is another game where the Packers in the playoffs had a massive collapse, and that can prompt quick decisions. The Packers really struggled overall, I think, in the run game here. Josh Jacobs had 19 carries for 55. Again, something that we've talked about in the past, not being ideal. Josh Jacobs did return a couple of kickoffs in this when the Packers were starting to get a little bit desperate as the Bears were coming back into it. Did return one to the 50-yard line. Did fumble it nonetheless, but they did get that one back. Romeo Doubs had a big game, 8 for 124 and a touchdown, 11 targets. Matthew Golden, I think, Shawn, the interesting thing when we talk about him in a moment is they went to him in key spots. There was a 4th down conversion to him, a couple of 3rd down conversions. Then he had the big play, as I mentioned, on the touchdown, where it's a kind of sharp pass, makes a couple of guys miss and makes it into the end zone. He goes 4 for 84 in a touchdown. Jaden Reed had a nice touchdown on a pretty good route concept, 4 for 43 in a touchdown. And Christian Watson, 3 for 36 in a touchdown. Almost had a second touchdown, but that was led to the Doubs touchdown. He gets kind of catapulted into the end zone, fumbles it, Doubs recovers it. The Packers eventually get in, but nothing else in the receiving game outside of that. And the big talking point for the Bears has to be Colston Loveland. He has exploded over the last couple of weeks. 8 for 137 on 15 targets. I took a note, Shawn, at one point, and it was just Colston Loveland corner out. Like, can we get that message to the defensive coordinator? Like, that's what they want to do. That's how they kind of got this offense back on track, because Caleb Williams did struggle, particularly in that first half. He's 50% passing. He's 24 of 48 for 361, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Jordan Love did have 4 passing touchdowns, 323, but he's also just short of that 50% completion. So both of them having some issues completing passes at certain points in this game. Shawn, what are some of your key thoughts, key takeaways here? And I'm going to get your thoughts on Golden and Loveland entering 2026 in a moment as well.
Yeah, that's a pretty comprehensive and accurate encapsulation of the game there. Both quarterbacks end up throwing 45 plus passes. We look at those 19 extremely ineffective rushes for Josh Jacobs, and you think, I mean, again, this is the issue that the Packers have had. This, in some ways, is the danger of having that running back who is above average but not difference making. I mean, you can make a pretty strong case that that's the worst kind of running back to have, because it tempts you into running too frequently for the amount of explosiveness you're going to get. If you have, Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, Von Achane, I mean, you can use those guys on 20, 25 touches per game, and it's almost certainly just going to help you. Whereas if you have bad running backs like the Chiefs, you have to pass. But if you have this running back in the Josh Jacobs tier, maybe that's where things go wrong. But 19 carries within the context of Jordan Love throwing 46 times, it's harder to make the case that it's a run-pass mix issue here as much as it is an overall offensive concept problem. And you look at this game, and I didn't expect it to be nearly as exaggerated as it was. The Packers did dominate and did have this game set up all throughout, right? You look at the win probability, moving through the game, they go above 95% in the second quarter. They have another point in the third quarter where they go back above 95%. They go above 95% with about 6 minutes there to go in the game. I mean, you're in good shape, right? I mean, you should win that game. At the same time, I wouldn't put most of this on Matt LaFleur. I actually think the kicking mistakes decided the game. Yeah. And it's been unfortunate for the Packers fans that they've had to live with sort of lackluster kicking across the Matt LaFleur era. It has cost them in some big moments.
And an interesting note too, just, probably get, when you look at the box score, it's not going to be there, but the Bears and Ben Johnson do call a timeout just before that kick, before the half. And it felt like, they left it too late because they let McManus have a shot to see, how the wind was, how things were playing out. He converts that one, and obviously it doesn't count. But when they go to do the retake, then he misses that one. So again, the Packers at that point had a 21-3 lead at halftime. It would have been a complete 21-point lead versus an 18-point lead. which maybe changes some of the dynamics. And I know you did your show last week where you kind of did a draft of the current head coaches and who you would rather have your coach if they're starting up a franchise. Ben Johnson did have some decisions in this game that maybe I wouldn't have done. There's a 4th down conversion that fails early in this one where Matt LaFleur does a challenge on a reception that was fumbled deep in Bears territory. He goes for it in 4th down. They kind of had made the decision they're going for it in 4th down all the time. He talked after about maximizing his possessions, but some very good, I thought, on both sides, coaching decisions and challenges in this game, but it kind of worked out at the end in the favor of the Bears, who the thing I was struck by after, and a lot of teams might do this, but we all know that the Patriots came back to beat the Falcons in the Super Bowl, 6, 7 years, maybe even longer now, Shawn. Time's gone by pretty quick. But he did mention about in the offseason showing the team that video, and like when they're in this one 18 points down, and then even in the 4th quarter, they're in a hole, and he had some of the players from that team come in and talk to the Bears. And there's all, like, people do all sorts of motivational stuff, and you never know if any of it will work, if any of it will sink in. But I feel it hard to believe that there was no way that didn't resonate with how the Bears managed to stick with it in this contest and come back and win. And it's interesting to hear you saying about not really on LaFleur, because I felt like Shawn would be waiting here with a dagger ready to put into Matt LaFleur's back as we enter the show.
We know that, I mean, there's going to be some Aaron Rodgers rubbing it in when he struggles. That is kind of a bit at this point. But I mean, we're going to try and be, accurate. I think LaFleur is like with these guys. And there's so many things about this game still, but on the Matt LaFleur thing, I kind of think, Colm, that this is a situation where the Packers have so much talent and they now are so snake bitten with LaFleur that this is one of those sort of unique situations. I think actually unlike the Ravens situation, where the Ravens are taking quite a bit of risk by moving on from John Harbaugh, and just the overall, the Ravens.
That's an organizational shift.
Yeah, but the Ravens' overall organizational quality is so high that they're probably looking at this as not particularly risky, and that maybe John Harbaugh actually doesn't add much of anything. But you do have that looming possibility of going from a juggernaut and a team that is just every single season one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the NFL, and the frustration with not getting over the hump despite that, to a team that drops down to be in the 10th to 15th best team in the NFL. And suddenly you're like, oh, these seasons we were so disappointed in, we now would love to have one of them a little bit more often. I think with the Packers that this is a situation where it probably actually would be an interesting calculated risk to fire him here. And at the same time, then I think that he would immediately vault to the top of the coaching ranks. A
little bit like what we're going to see with the Dolphins.
And whoever gets him right has landed the best head coach, and he's going to go on and continue to be successful. I think a firing here could be win-win.
It could be win-win, but that's exactly, I feel like you're just in that middle ground where, like, you fire him, like, be careful what you wish for. The grass mightn't always be greener on the far side. And I do think that it's kind of really in that position where the results maybe deserve it, but then there's only so many of these seats to fill. Like, if you were going to say that you get, like, I don't know, maybe a Mike McDaniel or someone like that, you go for it. But again, you mentioned Jim Harbaugh there. The conversation was around him potentially coming in. Then, there was speculation about agents and former front office people, and I don't know, the weirdest kind of links were being made, Shawn, yesterday by Adam Schefter and crew to try and make some news coverage happen. But that is kind of how the game played out. Super disappointing as a Packers fan. Thought that they had a chance to upset them. The game started off really well. Just the Bears really clamped down in the second half defensively, and was a very impressive performance. Basically, in soccer, we have the cliche. I don't know if it translates as well to the NFL because of the 4 quarters element, but a game of 2 halves is regularly talked about. This was very much a game of 2 halves. Packers defense on top. Then it faded in the second half, and kind of vice versa for what happened the other way. But the standout player, Shawn, for me, Again, I mentioned the way the Packers went to golden and key spots, which surprised me because of the way they kind of haven't used them that much all of the year. And then on the other side, you have Colston Loveland. We've talked about him a lot in recent weeks, just is going to be an absolute juggernaut heading into next season. What I'm intrigued to find with him, Shawn, is where are you putting him if you were like drafting now? So you have like Trey McBride, Brock Bowers, Colston Loveland probably has to be the next name there from a tight end ranking. We'll talk about the 49ers in a moment, but we had the very unfortunate news of George Kittle and his Achilles injury. When we look through, though, Loveland, Tyler Warren, we were very hyped for earlier in the season, and a bit like the Colts season, it all just kind of tailed off from both ways. But expect him to be in a prominent position next year as well. But Colston Loveland has had a monster rookie breakout over the last kind of 6 weeks or so.
Yeah. And to the point where I think in tight end premium, especially, you're already kind of looking at him at the 1-2 turn, which is a shocking price tag based on sort of where he was 2/3 of the way through the season, where it certainly appeared, over the first month to 2 months, like Tyler Warren was clearly the guy, and that this Bears offense was not only not going to function, but that Loveland was going to be kind of lost in the mix. Colm, I want to go back to this. This is probably the most interesting of all the games here, although it was a fascinating wild card weekend. You run into a potential problem if you create too much of a narrative out of these fourth quarter victories for the Bears. But I think we also lose information if we look at it as exclusively narrative and exclusively randomness and exclusively incredible luck. What we saw coming out of half is what we expected to see, which is that the Bears would make adjustments on both sides and they would start to shut down the Packers, in part because the Packers would become too conservative, right? This is a game where, just as you described, the Bears actually didn't punt, right? They went for it on different things. So the stops are still stops because you stopped them, on 4 downs instead of 3 downs. It's an even more impressive stop. But the Bears don't punt. The Packers come out and they go 3 and out, 3 and out, 5 and out to start the second half. And it probably isn't so much a matter of, okay, we just want to get the game over. We're willing to go a little bit more run heavy. We're willing to run on 1st and 10. We're really willing to run on 2nd and 10. But at some point, if you want to use Josh Jacobs, you're going to have to run at some point. So it's not like you can just pick these out and be like, oh, this was the play that cost him, or this was the play. You've got to be able to complete those passes, go down and score as well. But when you look at this team, and the thing for me with the Packers is the injuries. They've had some key injuries, again, throughout the LaFleur tenure. And I think the thing that is so frustrating about the last 2 years is that Jordan Love's metrics have been good, and they also do have weapons. Romeo Doubs kind of proves again in this game that he is a viable NFL starter, and then you surround him with these weapons. You talk about Matthew Golden. He looked absolutely and utterly electric in this game. It is still important to point out, he just draw the 5 targets. You have Jaden Reed and Christian Watson both going for 7 within the context of the 46 passing attempts. You'd like to see even more volume for them. All 4 of those guys score touchdowns. If Reed is healthy throughout the full season, then you get more passing volume almost certainly. If Watson is healthy for the full season, you get more passing volume almost certainly. If Tucker Kraft is still there, they probably don't have those 3 punt drives to start the second half, and they win the game and they're moving on. And especially when you consider the weaknesses of some of these other teams, not exactly becoming the favorite, but certainly a very live team to go to the Super Bowl. If Jordan Love is a little bit healthier, you get more passing volume. You can look at this Packers team and say, coming into 2026, it's a little bit like with the Los Angeles Chargers, where you feel like the 2 7 seeds that aren't able to come through, that they might be the favorites on the AFC and NFC sides, respectively, for next season. Again, with the Packers, it's this idea of, are you going to actually utilize these elite resources you have? Whereas, on the Bears side, that Ben Johnson is going to have a plan for winning this game in the fourth quarter, and that as he continues to get to call plays and to make adjustments, that the Bears are going to move the ball, and that Caleb Williams, despite being like a 50% passer, is going to get you touchdowns as you go down the stretch. when you are an opponent of the Chicago Bears, you need to have the points ready to fend that off, which is what the 49ers did a couple weeks ago, right? And they're like, Caleb Williams is going to put 40 on us. We have to score more than that. And they were able to do it. When you think about Colston Loveland within the context of the Bears and Ben Johnson and what they paid for him and what they've now unlocked. And I mean, Caleb Williams is basically fourth quarter Bo Nix with like too much arm talent, right? When we think about Drake May as being like the perfect passing quarterback, maybe the perfect quarterback overall, he's got some weaknesses. We'll talk about those in a moment. But Caleb Williams is one of the first quarterbacks that you watch and you're like, yep, just too much arm talent, right? If he had a little bit less, then he would be better. I mean, this is like 50 dropbacks and 1 sack. Now, part of that, again, goes to the unfortunate injuries with the Parsons situation, right? But Caleb Williams will drop back. He'll do all this craziness. You will not sack him. He will occasionally run. And then you have these weapons for him, and you have probably the best coach in the NFL already. I mean, the Chicago Bears are a good team. I think you've got to be really excited if you're them to get to host a Rams team that, I mean, Colm just almost lost to the Panthers again.
I'm calling it now, Shawn. The Rams are not losing this week. I don't think they do what the Packers are going to do. I think they got caught out being overconfident and how that game. But we'll talk about it in a moment. But
the Rams are 12-5 during the season, and almost lost to the Panthers again. The Rams are the team that is massively inflated by the media. That is my take. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to lose to the Bears, but the Rams are the team that's a joke. Colm.
So the two
Loveland.
The two most overinflated teams in the media compete this week then.
The Bears are the team, maybe. I'm telling you. Colston Loveland, 1-2 turn pick next year. Is he going to give us Trey McBride, or is he going to give us Kyle Pitts a year two?
That's always like, it's hard to like go in. I think there's a lot less manufactured stuff with how we're seeing him being used this year versus what maybe we've seen with Pitts. And I just, the way he's just so smooth, the way he's running these routes and his ability to make these catches is like I mentioned earlier, kind of in joking, the corner route thing. It's like, yeah, you can plan for that, but you can't really take it away. Like his touch, the 2-point conversion to him is like, anyone want to try and make a play? It's like too easy, but it's because he's so good. And the only way to take that away is to put multiple more people on him. You mentioned the Bo Nix thing. You've also talked a lot about that situation on Stealing Bananas, but the difference in talent that's around Caleb Williams versus that's around Bo Nix is definitely striking between the two of those. And I think this team, with the coach that they have, is much too good to be, just turning up in the fourth quarter. And if they get the win, they get the win, obviously, but that's not really what, like, there's times where you can see that Ben Johnson is visibly frustrated at what what Caleb Williams is doing in these matchups. The other one I want to touch on just quickly, Shawn, before we move on, is Matthew Golden. Very small sample size, one game, but it was a lot more impressive than we've seen from the much bigger season-long sample size. I did see that there was a stat during the game that popped up that he was the, from whatever, I don't know if it was all first-round rookies, but certainly it was basically him and Kadarius Toney are the only rookie wide receivers taken in the first round that didn't score at least one receiving touchdown in their first season. Don't know about you, Shawn, but mightn't be the place that you want to be getting paired with Mr. Kadarius Toney.
That was the response among the folks I watched the game with as well, which is that there are no good categories to be put in with Kadarius Toney. Yeah, the frustration here is just that we saw an unbelievable finish to Jaden Reed's rookie season. He actually had a much stronger prospect profile than Matthew Golden. He determines who wins the FFPC main event that year. He's got elite athleticism. You can't stop him from getting the ball. You can't stop him after the catch. The only people who can stop Jaden Reed are Reed with the injuries. I mean, the injuries aren't necessarily his fault. And then the Packers with the way they've decided to design this offense. You look at Christian Watson and how he really has slowly but surely started to emerge as the player they envisioned when they reached for him in the draft. You think about Tucker Kraft and how there's just really no way for him to get the type of volume in the Packers offense that Loveland appears now to be locked into in the Bears offense. But I mean, Tucker Kraft, probably the best player on this offense. My question would be with someone with Golden, where you have a good game to finish, and you know that's going to really shift how people think about him. It's going to create a lot of hype. Some of the hype is certainly deserved. It does. I mean, it should change the way that we look at him. The problem now is, what are the prices going to be, and how consistent can he be for us in things like Dynasty and redraft, especially if you bring LaFleur back, and it's going to be a heavy dose of Josh Jacobs, and you can count on Jacobs. But then at the receiver position, you're rotating routes, you're limited in terms of what you're actually being asked to do in any individual week's game plan. Certainly, we wouldn't put him in the mix with some of these teams that have been just so unlucky year in and year out with the injuries. I mean, the Packers could come back and have all these guys healthy now for a number of years in a row. One of the issues with that, though, is that you actually do have all of the guys. It takes this problem you already have with the rotations and thins out the potential volume even further. He seems like a guy, especially when you know that he was a pretty big reach by the Packers in the first place, which doesn't mean that he couldn't actually be what they see, right? I mean, in this game, he looked like what they saw when they picked him, but you just have you're stacking a variety of different types of risk when you have a player who is a big reach as the draft pick originally. That player then both struggles with injuries and plays very poorly from a production perspective as a rookie. Then you finish out with the big game where you look sensational and everybody is going to want to have that second year leap. We're going to get a second year leap. The problem is, like, how big of a leap is priced in by ADP? And is there realistic room for him to then crush whatever next year's price is?
I think that's all very fair, and it's kind of the way I'm looking at it too, but it was a step in the right direction from what we've seen over the course of the season. Moving on, Shawn, to the game I think we learned the least about from either team. That was the 49ers and the Philadelphia Eagles. The 49ers getting the win, and again, the kind of story of this season has been, fighting through adversity and injury. They have been pretty decimated over the course of the season, but in this one, they get the win. They snatch it pretty late, and I have to say, maybe the highlight play of the entire weekend from a touchdown perspective. We had a couple of highlights in this. Demarcus Robinson starts off early with a couple of long waving runs, but the touchdown pass to Christian McCaffrey, he has 2 receiving touchdowns in this one, 6 for 66 and 2 touchdowns. They do, as they kind of have recently, struggled pretty much on the ground, and with George Kittle going out with the Achilles injury, that was a real blow. You see these kind of legendary players. Kittle's almost, for me, kind of one of these mythical kind of guys in terms of what he brings to this franchise. It seems like a pretty cool dude, but he tears his Achilles, and you're looking at his age, probably misses all of next season. Recovery from Achilles is pretty bad. Pretty bad in terms of, like, it's a long recovery for it. Just really disappointing to see that. But we have talked a little bit about Jake Tonges. Time for him to step up further, but just the 1 reception for him in this game. But the highlight I was talking about is the touchdown pass from Juwan Jennings for 29 yards to Christian McCaffrey. The way they worked that around with the toss back kind of play on the end around, and he just puts it in there as McCaffrey dives out to get it. But kind of the struggles we've seen from the Eagles at times and how their offense has run. I actually thought that those points in this game where I thought Saquon Barkley was running better than he has throughout a lot of the season, but Purdy has 2 interceptions, but they still get the job done here as they continue to fight on. But eventually they're gonna run out of bodies here, Shawn, to go ahead and continue to win. Any notes really on this contest where the 49ers advance?
This was a weird one, like you mentioned, and the sad note with Kittle swamps a lot of the other stuff.
Yeah.
But the pass catching running backs column and how much they do for you. McCaffrey as a receiver.
McCaffrey's pretty much a receiver now that sometimes runs the ball. I know he ran 15 times here, but like
that was the part that was just so striking to me again in this game. I know this has been an issue all season. I'm sure that most listeners are like, I mean, this has been the case. I mean, why is it coming out to you here? I couldn't believe how washed he looked as a running back. I mean, he just simply looked bad, which is not what you're expecting from Christian McCaffrey. He's just been, as a runner, he's been a poor man's Barry Sanders. As a receiver, he's been a rich man's Marshall Faulk, right? You're not expecting like one part of that to be like literally and actually bad. Maybe that's still not the case, but I was struck by how mediocre he looked as a runner in this game. And yet, that's not the part that matters. And again, if he's bad enough as a running back that you're thinking, you know what we should do is throw in more passes, that makes your offense better. And so that's the contrast with how Josh Jacobs is used for the Packers, for example. I did think Demarcus Robinson was impressive in this. I did think that Juwan Jennings, who just has the one reception, but they talk about Jennings and how he's a pretty intense dude. He throws the touchdown pass. That play was really cool. He is absolutely incensed at one point fairly late in the game when Kendrick Bourne has a little bit of a lapse in terms of understanding how he needs to line up. I don't think you want to make a mental mistake when Juwan Jennings is anywhere in your vicinity. But you see the 49ers as a well-coached and exciting football team, even though, especially now with the Kittle injury, this is not the 49ers window, right? When you're as good as the 49ers are, you want to be in the mix every year. They've done what some other teams like the Ravens and Chiefs did not do, which is that in a down season still actually put together an exciting squad that won a bunch of games, scored a bunch of points, overcame all of the hurdles and obstacles that they're dealing with. But when you're this 49ers team, and especially when you have to go on the road and play the defending Super Bowl champions, you should get crushed in this game. And I thought that Ben's points on Nick Sirianni during our big Ceiling Bananas draft, Colm, I was talking about the Super Bowl teams draft a few weeks ago as being one of the most fun little, SB specials. The coaching draft was probably even more fun than that. Anybody who hasn't checked it out, head on over there when you get the chance. We did have a good time with it. I think that Nick Sirianni deserves an immense amount of credit for what they've done, for winning the Super Bowl last year and cultivating some of the coordinators who have come through. You can be the victim of your own success, both from a free agency perspective and from the perspective of just losing so many coordinators because at times your team is so utterly dominant. But then you come back with the contrasts, and to be in the Super Bowl 4 years ago and really probably look like the better team in Kansas City, not exactly gets lucky. You have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. It's not luck, but you're probably the better team. And then you come off of that and you're awful, right? That is a huge red flag. But then you come back and you win the Super Bowl. And not only do you win the Super Bowl, but you embarrass the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. And then you come back and this is your season. The 2 seasons off of the Super Bowl appearances, they both feel like first or second percentile outcomes in that they're virtually impossible when you have this much talent. The 49ers defense has quietly gotten better, and it's one of the things that Blair wrote about in his FFPC playoff contest preview last week. I didn't necessarily expect the Eagles to light them up, but we do know the 49ers have some issues on that side of the ball. For Jalen Hurts to come out and throw 35 passes and average less than 5 yards per attempt, it was the culmination of an entire season of gross incompetence. Now, Jalen Hurts is probably pretty wildly overrated as a passer. The coordinators that he has had have had to deal with his limitations, and yet saying that he's wildly overrated is different than saying he's bad. Because, Jalen Hurts is very highly thought of, right? And so, you're still talking about a quarterback who gives you different avenues for winning. And when you have the offense built correctly, is very difficult to deal with. especially when you have these weapons, because you can attack vertically. You've got Devontae Smith, you have AJ Brown. This simply shouldn't be possible, what happened in this game. And yet, this is just what we've more or less witnessed all season. And it kind of goes back to the same problem that I have with the Packers. Now, in both of these cases, when you're frustrated by something like I was, and then that thing seems to be the issue in the playoff game, and you feel like you're right, then you're going to say, like, look, I was right. Sometimes it's just that that's the way that it turned out. But for both teams, the unwillingness to pursue a competitive playoff-worthy game plan, game in and game out during the regular season, then you get to the playoffs and you're not ready for the playoffs. You don't know how you want to pursue those games. Now, some of this is on Jalen Hurts, but some of it goes back to this idea of we're going to acquire AJ Brown and then we're going to use him haphazardly enough, use him inconsistently enough that he develops a terrible attitude, which he has had now for multiple seasons.
Yeah.
He becomes kind of the squeaky wheel, and you have this stretch in the middle of the season, or toward the end of the season, where he has these 100-yard games, because there's like Devontae Smith is not very healthy and AJ Brown wants the ball, and we're going to have a huge headache if we don't get in the ball. And so you do those things. So it's not exactly like they haven't used AJ Brown, but when you have used him in ways that are forced, when your overall game plan is not particularly good, and when forcing the ball to him has not fixed his attitude issues, or apparently hasn't, and you have a game like this, I talk about Jalen Hurts' numbers, but part of that is because AJ Brown was dropping passes left and right. He played a horrible game. And I think you can put this loss almost entirely on him, because if he makes the plays that a superstar receiver has to make when the balls are on his hands, and in some cases just adjusting as he's running so he can get his hands on balls on deep passes, then they win. I mean, this is a 23-19 game where if AJ Brown plays like a star, plays like the player that he thinks he is, that he tells his teammates that he is, that he demands the ball about, then the Eagles win. You just have so many points of weakness where the Eagles fell apart in this game and in this season. I don't think that an above average head coach allows this to happen.
I think the other thing was interesting with the wild card round this week was that the games did kind of tilt on a couple of individual moments. Like we talked about the Packers or some of the kicking issues, and could they have done things slightly differently? But also in this, this game, you're mentioning a couple of AJ Brown catches here or there. There is one where they do convert the fourth down at the end to Goddard before they fail to get the scores that they need right there at the very end when they turn it over on downs. But just some small plays that could open the door in different directions. And another game that played out in was the Rams versus the Carolina Panthers. And again, have to give props to the Panthers for what they were able to do in an 8-9 season to get to the playoffs, and then to almost knock off the Rams in this situation, because they are a team, Shawn, last year, heading into the season in 2024, one of the worst defenses in the entire league. And this year, I know they give up 34 points here, so it's hard to really make the case, aren't they great? They only give up 34 points. But they, do cause a lot of issues here throughout the kind of third parts of the second and fourth, but not complete of the whole game, to Stafford and the Rams. 24-42 for Stafford, 304, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. But this was a game where I felt like he was more off his game than he has been. And I know we've been on different sides of the MVP conversation, but this was a challenging one for him. The one thing I will say is he throws the ball 42 times. Nakua and Adams have 31 targets. I do think that, going to those guys makes sense. The one thing then I would say is the amount of incompletions to both of them is not ideal.
Because they're dropping passes left and right. Devontae Adams' ability to catch is disappeared. I mean, it's off the charts terrible. And
I've talked to you if they use Devontae Adams like Antonio Gates in the red zone, he'll catch everything. Outside of the red zone, your mileage may vary on what happens. But there was passes in this that some of them were definitely on Stafford. Like, his accuracy is one of his strengths. In this game, it was not there a number of different times. But there was just some passes, particularly to Adams, that just have to be caught and weren't anywhere near being caught.
It's a 5 for 13, where some of those 13 are forced, but like 4 or 5 of them are dropped.
Yeah.
And then the Puka one is interesting because you can't call out Devontae Adams and ignore the fact that Puka dropped probably a 50, 60-yard touchdown.
Yeah.
At the same time, Puka also saved the game because Matthew Stafford throws an egregious late interception.
It down, yeah.
Where Puka goes up and
Perfect
makes
DB
an incredible defensive back style play on the ball to save the entire game.
Yeah.
The Rams will be out of the playoffs despite having played the Carolina Panthers if Puka doesn't make that play.
He does. And Puka deserves all the flowers they've given him like all season long. 2 touchdowns, one of those being like a reception behind the line of scrimmage that he takes in. Like he gets the opening 2 touchdowns, but he has key plays and key situations when they score at other points. But the side, Shawn, I want to talk about, a bit like the Packers and Matthew Golden and them being eliminated. There was some positive signs here at times from Bryce Young. He has a rushing touchdown. He has 1 interception, 1 touchdown, 264 yards. The backfield, the way it has turned out as the season went, like Chuba Hubbard disappeared for the midpoint of the season. Rico Dowdle was the greatest running back of all time. It's kind of completely gone in the other direction here. But he gets 2 rushing touchdowns, but doesn't do a lot in the running game, 13 for 46. The part I want to talk about, though, is where, like, you know, McMillan has some really impressive plays in this, but he has the 7 targets, 5 for 81. Jalen Coker, though, 12 targets, 9 receptions, 134, and a touchdown. 52-yard reception, has a pass interference goes against him for in the region of 30 yards, and then has a 30-yard completion straight after that for Chuba Hubbard's 2nd touchdown. Coker injured the majority of the season. We were talking about him. Every time we talk about Coker, we reference that Blair Andrews, big Jalen Coker fan. But he looked tremendous here. And then you get into a situation as heading into next year, if both are healthy, how close are they in terms of like what, you know, we're going to have McMillan ranked significantly higher, but Jalen Coker, I thought, done a lot to impress here. Was it a case of the coverage on McMillan? What did you see in terms of why Coker drew the 12 targets to McMillan's 7?
Well, he's just going to get a lot less in terms of defensive attention, but he's awesome, right? And the problem you have in this game is that Xavier Legette drew 4 targets, but that's probably 4 targets too many. If you just have him not in the game plan at all, maybe you win this game.
It's like you get into the key situation here where the Panthers are trying to continue the game. You get to 4th down. Like, why are we targeting Jimmy Horn, with a 4th down? I mean, is it to completely trick the Rams that you would never pass to this guy? Why are we doing that at this point?
It's unfortunate that is the way the game ends. Bryce Young is at 21 for 40, below 7 yards per attempt. And yet at the same time, if you buy into QBR at all, it's interesting that he's at about 75. Matthew Stafford just below 50. If you watch this game as your first NFL game with no context, you certainly wouldn't pick out that Matthew Stafford is on the verge of an MVP, whereas Bryce Young is very much in question. Now, it does seem like his 5th-year option will be picked up, but that would be a conversation given the expense the teams pay even for very poor quarterback play. And Bryce Young is sort of on the very opposite end of the spectrum from Caleb Williams, where Williams, you have this excess of arm talent that's probably, or that you could argue is a problem. Bryce Young, every time he releases the ball, you're thinking, is it just ever going to get there? But when it does eventually get to his receiver, if it makes it there successfully, that's easier to catch, right? It's a very soft pass because it doesn't seem like there's anything on it. You could have a team here that was very exciting. I don't know if you can do it with Dave Canales, although the argument would be that he got a very limited Carolina Panthers team into the playoffs, even though they had to back in. But they do make the playoffs despite an 8-9 record because they defeated the Rams, they defeated the Packers. If you lose those games, then you're 6-11 and you're nowhere close, right? And then you had this game here that you probably should have won. I mean, you were right on the edge of it. We had a bunch of weirdness in the first half, a little bit like in the Bears game, where it almost felt like the Panthers were not even. it wasn't so much that they weren't going to compete in this game, but that their goal was to lose by 50, because you have all of the mistakes that they're making. They refuse to pick up first downs. The Rams have the ball the entire half, and then you get a stop, and Trevor Etienne is like, nope, we're going to let the Rams keep having the ball. To overcome all of those things, to take the lead in the fourth quarter. And this game, too, was, if you're as big a Jalen Coker fan as Blair Andrews, and then sort of downstream of that, as so many of us are, to watch him have this game after you had dreamed of this for the 2025 season, it's just so bittersweet, because now you're thinking, well, I'm going to be pulled back in and I have him in every single best ball league again next season.
It's like I was right, but it didn't matter.
But this combination of McMillan and Coker could be very exciting for the Panthers next season if they are willing to throw the ball enough. Because
I think instantly they that's a better wide receiver duo than any that you could take from the Packers. As a Packers fan, I think depth
though is just. I mean, I love those Packers guys. You just
have
to throw them the ball. You have to use them. You have to throw them the ball.
I feel like there's just a bit more high-end upside with the two of those.
But McMillan, the scouting report that we've always given on him is that, so the idea with Drake London, right, was that he is a more laterally explosive version of Mike Evans. And then as his career has move through the early stages, you see, yes, that's probably true. And Drake London does give you a lot, but he also doesn't give you this just overwhelmingly physical vertical receiver from the perspective of, you cannot stop Mike Evans if the Bucs want to get Mike Evans the ball, right? He's going to go for 1,000 yards. He's going to go for double-digit touchdowns. He's a force of nature. Drake London is not quite that. With McMillan, he's Drake London, but with more athleticism, more ability to get vertical. He's just a little bit better in every phase. What will that mean playing for the Panthers versus with London? You have still had to ask the question, what would he be if he played for not the Atlanta Falcons? Because neither Michael Penix nor Kirk Cousins are guys who are going to necessarily elevate you to stardom. Now, London has had the benefit of not really having a lot of target competition, which is going to help in different ways. But you look at McMillan here, and you can really see that over the last month to 6 weeks of the year, where you're talking about a size athleticism profile that is pretty unique. It's certainly not Calvin Johnson, but it's in that kind of next group down from that, where if the passing offense is competent and if you have someone else to complement you, you're off to the races. This Panthers team, sometimes you have these moments, you have these stretches, and you certainly had one with Bryce Young to finish the 2025 season, where I know this has been debated a little bit and is a little bit controversial, but SIS had fantastic peripherals for him over that final half to a third of 2025. And it looked like there was this possibility that he was going to be one of the breakout stars of 2026. And then you go through the season, and mostly he looks like someone who's on the verge of being benched and that the organization needs to go in a different direction. You have a few of these games late. You have this game against the Rams where their ability to stick with them, to counterpunch, to make some of these plays gives you the impression that the 2025 spurt may have pulled us in too early when the team still wasn't ready. They were going to go and use a top 10 pick on McMillan. He was going to need to develop a little bit. They were still going to try and get something out of Xavier Legette to not admit failure on that. That experiment bombed. And Coker, the guy who was ready to be the other potential star, was not healthy, like you were saying. It could be that we're going to get what we hope for in 2025 just a year late. Not that Bryce Young is going to be a star, but he can be the kind of competent caretaker quarterback that when you have a McMillan-Coker combo, those guys can flourish. And that's what I'm looking forward to seeing next year. Because again, these things that we're always talking about with Coker, undrafted free agent, it's going to be a tough path. When you get hurt, it's going to be a tougher path. When the team is trying to prove that their first round pick isn't a bust, you're going to have other things you have to get through. And yet Coker was the guy who, in addition to having been productive in the past is actually big and athletic, right? When you watch Coker make these plays, you're not thinking to yourself, oh, well, there's, an undrafted free agent, made good. You're thinking there's the guy where if teams just really could have evaluated him against elite competition in college, would have been a late first round pick. And if that in fact is the case, the future is pretty exciting for the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, I think it is pretty exciting. The other part I want to mention is Parkinson did get the late touchdown to win this one. I do think it was a pretty nice catch. It looked like it's going to be like a catch and out of bounds at the 5-yard line, and he kind of navigates the twist and pirouettes himself into the end zone. Pretty fun play to win the game there for the Rams. Going to go rapid fire, Shawn, between these last two games. We get the Jacksonville Jaguars losing 27-24 to the Josh Allens in this one. It has become like, I know we joke about it sometimes, Shawn, but it's pretty much Josh Allen and nothing else in this organization at the moment. And Josh Allen was enough on this occasion to get it done. It may have broke the record for the longest tush push in NFL history with he almost gets in from the 11-yard line, but he does get in then just after that. He has the 2 rushing touchdowns, 11 for 33. Quiet day for James Cook, 15 for 46. Josh Allen, 273 yards through the air, 1 touchdown. It is spread around quite a bit outside of Khalil Shakir, who had 12 targets, 12 receptions for 82 yards. But it was enough to get the win in this one. Shawn, I may have put the curse last week on Cam Little when I talked about, he can kick it from anywhere. And we know he can. Does miss a field goal in this one, which was unfortunate. Ends up being kind of the difference between the two teams is outside of the first quarter field goal for the Bills. They match each other the rest of the way through. We will be previewing the rest of the playoffs when it comes to the show that will come out on Wednesday. So we probably don't have to dive too much into what happened with the Bills here, but I've talked a few times in recent weeks, Shawn, asking you about Parker Washington. He had 12 targets and a 7 for 107 and a touchdown. I have been very impressed with how he has kind of developed over the course of the season. And, when you have Brian Thomas and you have them trading for Jacoby Myers, you have him completely gapping the two of them. Like he has 12 on his own. They have 6 combined targets. Although Brian Thomas does also get in the end zone. We get Travis Etienne into the end zone on a nice route, 5 for 49 for him. He continues to look really good, 10 for 67 on the ground. Tootin on the early touchdown drive kind of bangs off a couple of really nice runs. I thought he looked good, but he's capped at the 4 rush attempts for him. Still very interested to see what leads for him coming in next season. I thought that point of the game, I was thinking maybe they'd lean on it more, but Etienne has looked really good. So Parker Washington, though, Shawn, I'm just going to pitch it out now. I did a trade this week, and actually in my home league, but traded away Garrett Wilson for Jameson Williams. But the players that I ended up doing it, and kind of like we talk about past to success with some of these names, the players that kind of got it over the line, and it was just like tempting, like, what if they have a good game this week? Will they gain any value? But it was Matthew Golden and Parker Washington along with Jameson Williams. I feel pretty good after how the games have turned out. I did see a message in our group chat at one point that, the stretcher was coming out and I wasn't following the games live. And I was like, unfortunately, it ended up being for George Kittle, but I was like, oh no, it's going to be for Parker Washington. But he had a really nice finish to the season. Again, as the expectations growing a little bit for what he could be, I think at this point he's clearly the one that Trevor Lawrence trusts.
This matchup superficially with the Bills is one you're going to have to run the ball successfully with. The Bills' pass defensive numbers are pretty sturdy, although you don't really expect them to stop good teams. That's been a big part of the problem through the years with this Buffalo defense, is that they look good and they can embarrass bad teams, but they can't handle good teams. We did see them handle Trevor Lawrence for the most part in this game, and we certainly saw them handle Jacoby Myers, who has been really the catalyst for this Lawrence breakout over the last month to 6 weeks, where he has been the best quarterback in all of football. He looked fine in this game. Didn't look like the best quarterback in all of football. You definitely have a little bit of the contrast here where Trevor Lawrence feels like, even though Lawrence has been in the NFL now for a pretty long time, this is one of the issues you run into when you have a bunch of bad coaches to start, is that you're a little bit delayed into getting into the playoffs, starting to develop that playoff experience, and working through in a way where eventually Trevor Lawrence will be on the Josh Allen side of it, where people are rooting for him and saying, okay, I mean, this is his chance to get over the hump. The Bills were able to limit Myers. That did cause some problems for Jacksonville in terms of how they wanted to run things. But, I mean, yeah, as you mentioned, Parker Washington looks fantastic. It's sort of funny because as you started explaining that trade, it's obviously not actually the case, but you're kind of thinking to yourself, would I trade Garrett Wilson for Jameson Williams? Yes. Would I trade Garrett Wilson for
that was where I started
Golden?
off. And I
Maybe yes. Would I trade Garrett Wilson for Parker Washington straight up? Maybe yes. Because Garrett Wilson going to be on the New York Jets, because as long as he's on the New York Jets, I mean, you could just trade him for a late third round pick sometime and be like, at least I no longer
I don't know the
have
Chiefs
that emotional
third round pick, will they?
I just
I will not bring up old wins, Shawn. We won't do that to you on this episode. We will jump though to the Patriots and the Chargers. This was one you kind of felt a little bit that the Chargers could be live in this one, and they were throughout it. Like they end up losing by 13 points, but it's a touchdown in the fourth quarter, which kind of separates the game. It's field goal fest up until that point. It's 9-3. So the picture changed, but really nothing dreadful from either team, I don't think. And it just defenses were really on top, making it a very tough night. We get 6 quarterback sacks for Justin Herbert for 39 yards. We get 5 sacks on Drake May for 33 yards. We have an interception for May, but he also has a touchdown. We have no touchdowns or interceptions for Herbert. The run game for the Chargers kind of non-existent. We do get some success there for the Patriots with 29 for 146. We did see Drake May rushing a little bit more than this. He has a long of 37 to set up one of those field goals. I think, like we joked about it last year, where they decided that they weren't going to rush Drake May at all at the end of the season when we were like talking about some of our playoff matchups. I think we'll see this more when they need it in the playoffs in particular, where he does have those wheels, but didn't need to be used an awful lot during the season. Then Stevenson had 3 for 75. He goes 48 yards on a dump off at the goal line. Keyshawn Boutte seemed to have some sort of force field around him when he caught the ball that the defensive backs had to fall over. I'm not quite sure what was happening there, but he went 4 for 66 with a 42-yard reception in there as well. Hunter Henry gets the decisive touchdown. Shawn, we're talking about these rookie players. We're not going to go over the ground again of Travion Henderson, but you have wanted to talk a little bit about Efton Chisholm, I think, at times. Kyle Williams come up with a catch in this one. Any of these rookies at wide receiver, there's going to be more chances for them, obviously, as they advance in the playoffs here, but any of them that you want to talk about? There's some names here, like you get a Jack West over target. I don't think we need to bring him up here for 2026 draft profiles, but what are we thinking here with both Chisholm, and is there anything there? Williams has flashed at times, but it's been a very quiet year.
If you're the Patriots, you've got to be pretty concerned about this game. You come in knowing that the Chargers' pass defense is elite and it's going to cause you some problems. But, I mean, Drake May had his worst game of the season. And you could see in this game some of the concerns that the Patriots have that have led them to take such a conservative approach. The 5 sacks, the complete lack of pocket presence, the 2 fumbles, the bad interception. The thing that makes all of this work is that your defense is able to run roughshod over a Chargers offensive line that just is not even there because of the injuries. And unlike a Sam Darnold, for example, unlike some of these other quarterbacks, Drake May can play a terrible game and it doesn't seem to bother him at all, right? When you're thinking about reasons that someone could be, like you were saying, that a month from now, Drake May will have carried the Patriots to a Super Bowl title and we're looking at him as the next Patrick Mahomes. I mean, this is the reason, because he is awful, but yet never shows even the slightest inkling, the slightest tendency to becoming flustered here. And as the Chargers continue to not pick up any first downs, he's like, eventually we'll make some plays and He makes some plays with his legs. They move the ball down the field. He scores in the end. He averages over 9 yards per attempt. Now, part of this is because he doesn't get rid of the ball in situations where you absolutely have to get rid of the ball. But Stephon Diggs had been hot. He looks awful in this game. On the other side of the ball, Keenan Allen looks like someone who should not be on an NFL field. The veteran receivers looked bad. And I don't think that you can come out of this game with Chisholm and Kyle Williams combining for 2 targets. You're getting completely locked down. You have young potential playmakers. You need to not just beat this Chargers team if you want to accomplish the Patriots' objectives. You need to now go and defeat the winner of Houston-Pittsburgh. If Pittsburgh wins, you're going to be pretty confident, and yet it's still a situation where the Steelers have Aaron Rodgers, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, even if he's washed up now. You have a coach who has never had a losing season. You have depth on both sides of the ball. The Steelers are not going to be a walkover. And then if you have to play the Houston Texans, the Texans are going to do the exact same things that the Chargers just did, but worse. Where are the playmakers? You got to get these guys involved in the game. You've got to give Drake May a little bit more of a chance, right? The training wheels have to come off at some point for the Packers. And you can say, well, the whole reason the training wheels are there are because of this game with the 5 sacks, the multiple fumbles, the pick, all of that. Let him play. He's had an MVP season. Let him play.
That's where we're going to close this one out. We'll talk about if they can make the changes and let him play, if they can advance here in the playoffs. We'll talk about those on the show that's going to come out on Wednesday. Make sure you subscribe to the RotoViz Overtime podcast feed. You'll get those shows once they are available. Shawn also mentioned Stealing Bananas. Great show last week. Head back and check that out if you haven't done so already, as they talk through some of the players on the teams, but also their kind of the coaching philosophies and how the NFL is set up pretty positively with a strong coaching cast at the moment. That's where we'll leave it. My name is Colm Kelly. You can follow me on socials at Overtime Ireland. You can check out all of Shawn's work up on rotoviz.com. And until we are back, have a good one.